Lizzie and we're the Photo Sisters.
And today we're going to give you a brief overview on photo editing.
So I use a combination of two programs to edit. I use Adobe Lightroom and Adobe Photoshop. I use Adobe Lightroom for the majority of my edits. That's where I cull my images, that's where I rate my images. I do most of my image editing in Lightroom, which I'll get to, and then I export high resolution JPEGs in Lightroom, and then I take my somewhat edited photos from Lightroom into Photoshop, and I finish off the sharpening and I run actions on my images in Photoshop, but the most of it happens in Lightroom. So if you're somebody who's just starting out, Lightroom is a really great program. It's easy to use, there's a lot of things you can do, and I'll show you at the end of the video how I export my images in Lightroom and kind of just a brief overview in there. But basically you want to use editing as just a way to kind of finish off and enhance your photos. It's certainly not going to make your photos. You want to get them as right in camera as possible. So make sure that you learn how to use your camera in manual and get some great lenses. We have all sorts of videos about taking better pictures. So basically I want to try to get my photo as perfect as possible in camera so that when I edit it, I just make minor adjustments. And usually the only things that I do are change a little bit of contrast, sometimes a little bit of white balance, and sometimes a little bit of exposure if I didn't get it right in camera. But it's just little tiny tweaks like that to kind of make the image pop and give it an enhancement. And then in Photoshop, I like to run the Kevin Kubota Magic Sharp action. I'll link to that below. I know that not every action out there is compatible with Photoshop elements, so if you're interested in running actions or if you don't know what Photoshop actions are, just make sure that they're compatible with your version of Photoshop before you buy them. But essentially actions are just a series of steps that people have created. You can make your own actions or you can purchase them. And so I just usually run the sharpening action on my files in Photoshop to give it that finishing look. But overall editing, like I said, is just a way to enhance the photo. It certainly can't bring something back that was out of focus or make a huge difference in your photo. So I don't have like any huge like revolutionary tips with editing, just because I don't spend a lot of time editing my photos. Just, you know, like I said, a little bit of contrast, nothing too fancy. I really do like some different actions out there from Red Leaf and Kevin Kubota. I'll link to both of those below, but overall you just try as much as you can to get the photo perfect, and then just do minimal tweaks in editing to give it the best look that you can. What do you do when you edit photos, Allie?
Typically, because I'm not a professional, my photos are just friends or myself or my kids, I do have Photoshop CS5 and I have Lightroom 4, and I prefer just to use Lightroom 4, and just like Lizzie, I'll really only change the contrast up a little bit or the exposure. I don't even play with white balance because I've never even thought to. My friend did teach me how to use some Kubota actions. Rachel, thank you. So in a rare occasion, I will pull a file from Lightroom and export it into Photoshop just to kind of work with those actions, but that is maybe once or twice a year. Like nothing. I'm just really quick into Lightroom. I spend maybe 5 minutes on like 40 photos and I export them out and I call it good.
Well, usually too, if it's just like pictures that I've taken for personal photos that aren't super crazy, I usually don't even take them into Photoshop. So it's certainly not necessary. Lightroom does have some sharpening abilities, but I just like my Kubota actions, so that's why I use Photoshop for that purpose. But Lightroom is really more than enough unless you want to take your images one step farther.
Does Lightroom have any actions?
Lightroom does have actions, but they're called presets. And so if you're interested in seeing what presets are, you can Google Lightroom presets, and you'll find different places. Some even have them for free, but you load them in and then it's on the left side of the screen and it will apply a set of things. Like, you can also make your own presets too if there's like a certain step of things that you do to every photo. Now I will say when I'm editing the pictures, I try to keep them as classic and as simple as I can, because then the photos will never look outdated. When I first started, and once you see all of the different things you can do with editing, it's really hard to not go crazy because there's all sorts of like antique looks that you can give to photos, or like sepia tones and selective color, like when it's all in black and white but one thing is in color. It's so, like, when I first started editing, I just wanted to do as many things as I could because I thought it was so cool, all of the things that you could do. But now I like to keep my images as classic as I can so that they never look outdated, because I started to realize that after a year or so I got tired of looking at the sepia tone, and it just wouldn't be something that I would want to keep forever. Now, everybody has a different style, so if you like that, that's totally fine, but I like to keep mine classic and simple just so they never look outdated. So 10 years from now, you won't be able to say, oh, that looks so 90s, or just like you're tired of looking at it, because it's something that, I mean, black and white and color never go out of style, so that's why I just like to keep it simple and basic.
Point in case, I had a great wedding photographer, and I have an album, and she chose some of the photos that went in the album. And to this day, the photos that are in selective color, where like I'm in black and white but my flowers are in color, like drive me insane.
But we thought it was so cool at the
time. I loved it. But now, looking back at it, I was just like, oh, I wish it was either all black and white or all in color. So.
Yeah, so it's totally fine. If you have a style that really likes antique tones or something like that, we're not saying that it's wrong to use that. If you like it, go for it. Photography is an art. It's great to be artistic with it. But just find your style and stick with it. Yeah. Because you don't want to be too inconsistent with how you edit photos, and you also want to make sure that you have photos that you'll like forever, that will never go out of style.
And another thing with being consistent with the way you edit, if you do have a business and you have a blog or even like sample albums that you give people, they're choosing you because of the way that you edit the photos and you make them look. So if you all of a sudden give them their photos and they're edited completely different, or
like, you know, what's trendy.
Yeah, maybe you marketed a lot of select coloring, or you only like to do black and white, but you give them something completely different, they might not be as happy because they liked what you had on your blog or what you showed them for a sample. So always kind of keep that in mind too, to kind of stick with your own personal style.
Yep. Stay true to your heart. But we have a video that will come after this that goes through my process of how I use my photos in Lightroom and in Photoshop. But sorry if this didn't blow your mind, because I don't do anything very special or crazy. Just make sure that you try to get it right in camera, and then just use editing as a way to finalize your photos and give it that finishing wow factor, instead of relying on photo editing to make it look completely different. Because unfortunately, you can't take a really bad picture and make it look professional afterwards. You need to make it look really great to start with, and then make it look even better afterwards. So just practice, practice, practice is all we can say to getting in focus, good exposure images to start with, and it will make your editing life so much more simple. So I have Lightroom open, and you're just going to go to wherever it was that you saved your files. We're going to be importing photos that are straight out of camera, so you want to upload your raw files, or if you were shooting in JPEG, but you don't want to load them into any other program. So just when you put your memory card into your computer, make a new folder in your pictures folder that just has the files copied and pasted straight from your memory card. So right now I'm going to take that folder. I just have this one called Sample Edits, and I'm going to drag it from my Finder window on top of the Lightroom icon. You can also go to File Import too, and then you can just import these files. You can change the metadata settings and that sort of thing, but today I'm just going to show you my simple editing techniques. Okay, so these are some raw files that are straight out of camera, and so a quick basic overview of Lightroom is, right now we are in the library module. You can see that from the top menu bar over on the right hand side, and library is just where you go to see a big overview of every photo that you've ever edited. And over here on the left side, you can see the different folders. So if you've ever, want to go back to a different session, or if you're editing a few different projects at the same time, you can go into Library to access different folders and see previous pictures that you've edited. And you can also click on this grid view down towards the bottom to view the grid in the library mode, just to see a nice overhaul here. But then where you're going to do most of your editing is in the Develop module. Over here in the library, you can see that on the right-hand side, you can see your EXIF data, like your settings of how you took the photo, and there's basic controls for exposure and that sort of thing, but I don't touch any of that. To do all of our edits, we're going to switch into the Develop mode, so just wait for that to load. And then here's where it gets pretty interesting. Over on the left-hand side, you're going to see that there's a list of presets. I really, really love the red leaf film emulsion presets for Lightroom 4 and 5. I'm not going to show you what those look like because I don't want to infringe on the copying, and honestly I don't even use it on every photo, so I'm not going to show you any presets, but that's definitely something that you can explore and try out on your own. So over on the left hand side is presets, but over here on the right hand side is most of the tools of which we will be using. So your histogram is at the top, and on any of these you can click and you can expand or hide the different sections. So if you're not seeing what I'm seeing right now, just click on the basic tab and it'll pop up for you. And then there's some tools here right beneath the histogram. There's this grid here that you can do crop. I do recommend that you lock the aspect ratio to original so that way when you drag to crop it, it will maintain the proper format that it needs to be for a 4:6 format. So yeah, you want to do that. And then these different brushes do different things. Honestly, I don't even know a big portion of Lightroom. I'm sure that you can make most, if not all, of your edits in Lightroom, but I choose to do, if I have little spots that I want to remove and that sort of thing, I usually do it in Photoshop. But most of what I'm going to do here is underneath this basic tab. So first off, you'll see your white balance. You can change your temperature. The left side is cool, the right side is warm, and you can just drag it to the side that you want it to be. And you can see that there's instantly a change made on my photo. So you can just drag this around to whatever you like. You can see the temperature off here to the right side, but there's no number that I shoot for. There's no magic formula. I just do it differently based on every image and, whatever I think looks good, and, the kind of look that I was going for. Sometimes it's in the 400s and sometimes it's in the 500s. Like I said, there's no magic formula or number that I shoot for. I just base it off of how I want the image to look. So this photo was backlit. You can see that there's sun coming in from the right hand side, and you can see some sun flare over on the left. You can see there's some trash right there, which is driving me insane, but I'll take care of that in Photoshop. But this photo I really want to be warm, so I'm definitely going to put it over on the warmer side, probably a little bit warmer than I would usually do a photo. And then tint here, the left side is green, right side's magenta. Of course, you can also customize this accordingly. If you shot in JPEG, your numbers here are going to look a lot different, and you might not have as much freedom and flexibility to do your white balance. So this is one of the reasons why I recommend to shoot in RAW, because you do have a lot more freedom to change the temperature and tint when you are adjusting the white balance in post-processing. Okay, and then down here with tone, if you didn't get your exposure correct and you need to change the exposure, you would do so with this tab. And then contrast, I always add a little bit of contrast, and you can see you just slide these tabs until you get the look that you're going for. And the nice thing about Lightroom is that it saves everything automatically, so you don't have to save anything before you close or go on to the next photo. It just automatically saves the changes for you, which is nice. And then you can just play around with all of these different tabs to see what it does. Blacks, in Lightroom 4 you have to move blacks to the left side to add blacks, and it actually looks like a negative sign. For some reason that seems counterintuitive to me. I'm not sure if it was because it used to be opposite or what, but you just kind of have to play around with the different tools to see what it does for you. And then lens corrections, that's nice if you have vignetting that you want to get rid of. But yeah, it's very simple. As you can see, it makes the changes instantly. And if you go absolutely crazy and you just don't like how the photo ended up looking, you can press this reset button here that's towards the bottom right of the toolbar on the side, and that will reset it to the original format that it was. So don't think that there's no point of return. You know, if you've gone too far and you don't know how to fix what you've done, just press the reset button and you can start at square one. So this photo looks pretty good to me. Like I said, I like it to look really natural and just, you know, enhanced a little bit, but not where it's unbelievably, insanely edited. So this looks good to me, and I'm going to press 3 on my keyboard, and that's going to give it 3 stars and set the rating to 3. You do need to rate your photo somehow so that when you're ready to export your edited files, you can know how to find them. Some people press a 1, a 2, a 3, a 4, or a 5, and that sets the 1 to 5 stars accordingly. You can just choose whatever works best with you, but when you know, I'm going to set all of my photos that I'm going to export to 3, just keep it consistent throughout. So now I'm going to go through these rest of the photos, but I'm going to do it faster so that you can kind of just see what I do. Mainly I'm just worried about the temperature and the contrast. The exposure I only have to change if I didn't get the exposure right in camera. And sometimes I pull it down just a little bit to make it look better. Okay, so this photo I want to do in black and white, and you can do that by underneath the basic tab, underneath presence. You just drag the saturation all the way to the left side, take out all of the saturation. And I like to add some contrast in my black and whites, so that's what I'm doing here. Set it to 3. This photo was taken after sunset, and she's facing the sun because it's pretty low behind the horizon, but this is a good example with a photo that needs some added exposure to it. And some warmth just to give it some life. See, this one's in the 700s, 7,000s. It just doesn't always depend. The number just varies. Same thing, no big deal. This is why it's really important to get your settings right in camera. And it happens, you get your settings wrong sometimes, but makes your life a lot easier when you get it as close to how you want it to look as possible. And this too is where it comes in handy to have really nice lenses, because then your photos can be sharp and look good. And if I was editing these for real for a client, I would probably do it a little bit slower because I'd be a little bit more meticulous about it, but I'm just going to show you guys the main gist of what I do here in Lightroom. You can see some of these were taken earlier in the day. This one was taken pretty close to sunset, that's why the light is so golden. And a lot of these golden situations, I like to pull up the goldenness and really boost the contrast because I like those specific pairings together. Sorry. Okay, so once you have your photos rated, you're going to go to this bar that's right up top the film strip, and then I'm just going to press this 3rd star, and that's going to filter my 3 stars or higher. Right now I'm seeing the same 10 photos that I had because there wasn't any photos that I didn't do, but if I didn't rate that one, I'm just going to set the rating to 0 because that's what they are by default. You would see that I only have 9. So if you took 300 photos at a session and you narrowed it down and edited 45 photos, when you press that 3 star, just the 45 photos that you rated are going to show up. So just make sure that you rate them consistently and that you have them all together. So once I have these edited photos, I need to export them. Obviously they need to come out of Lightroom and they need to be in JPEG format that can be printed. So I just do Command A to select all, and then you're going to go to File, Export. And this is what's really important, so listen here. Okay, so you're going to choose where you would like to export your folders. So I'm just going to go to my Pictures folder, the Photo Sisters, Lightroom example, and I'll make a new folder. Print. So usually you just go into the same folder that you imported it from, but then make a a folder called print or edited or something along those lines. If you already have that folder open, you can just check to put in subfolder, but I didn't do that. And then file naming, you just rename it to custom settings. I'll do this Lightroom example. Start number is 1. Okay, so for file settings, we're doing a JPEG file format. Quality, you want to set to 80, and this will give you high resolution quality without your files being overly large. So even if you want to print these photos in a 16 by 20 or even larger, an 80 quality should be perfect for just about any print size. So we want the quality to be 80, color space sRGB. The limit file size to is unchecked. And really importantly, we're going to check this resize to fit underneath the image sizing tab. So we're going to resize to fit width and height. When you're exporting photos for high resolution printing, therefore, something that you would save for yourself that you could print at a lab, or if you have clients and they're getting a high resolution disk of photos that they can print on their own, unless you want to limit the size that they can print the photos to, this is where you want to leave the dimensions blank. So if you're doing high resolution to print, leave the width and height blank, and we want the resolution to be 300 pixels per inch, or PPI or DPI, whatever you want to call it, but right here it's listed as pixels per inch. And a resolution of 300 PPI will give us the ability to print in any size. Now, if you are wanting to put these files on the web, you're going to want to make them a lot smaller. So if you have a blog or a website that you're putting them to, you're going to want to know the optimal width and height to save those photos in. It just depends. There's no magic number, but it's probably something around 800, 900, or sometimes 1,000 pixels wide. So just do your research on what you need for your blog or your website. And if you're doing web, you would want probably around 72 as your PPI for your resolution, but for most cases, when you're printing the files and you want them to be large enough to print in high resolution, we're going to do it in JPEG 300. So once you have that set up, just export, and then we're just going to wait for it to export. It's pretty quick, and once you've completed this step, you're totally fine to be done with your photos if you don't want to take them into Photoshop. But I like to finish my files off in Photoshop, so I'm going to open it up. But like I said, you're perfectly fine to be done after that step. So since Photoshop is up, I'm going to quit this. And now I'm going to open all of these photos that I just did. Wrong one. And this bar that you're seeing right here, this is my Kubota Image Tools dashboard. It's really outdated, but I like to use the Kubota actions. Okay, so here's my photo. You can see that it's really large right now, and it's only at 33.3% of its full size, which is very nice. But let's just say here, this one looks pretty good, so I'm done with this. This one looks okay. This one looks okay. This one looks okay. This one looks okay. This one looks good. 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 But this one has the trash. Okay, so this is the sort of thing that I do in Photoshop. I'm going to remove this trash, so I'm just going to zoom in on the trash. Whoops. And you can do that by just doing the command and plus sign on your keyboard to zoom in. And now we're going to just clone out the trash. So you're going to select the clone stamp, or you can just press the S button on your keyboard and then use the bracket to change the brush size. And then I'm pressing Option to get this little target thing, and I'm going to click on the area that I want to clone. So in this case it would be the clean area, and then that sample of that clean area is going to be duplicated where that trash is. And so then I'll just go through and I'll just kind of clean it up a little bit. If you guys want us to go into more detail about how to use the clone stamp, we can, but it's really simple. Just clone stamp and then Option, click on the area that you want to clone, and then click on the area that you want to remove and it will just make a stamp. And of course you can do Command Z if you make any mistakes. So that looks good too. So I'm going to File, Save As, since I made changes to it, JPEG, and then I'm just going to replace the file. And then when you're saving it in Photoshop for print sizes and high resolution, you're going to save the JPEG image quality as 10. Okay, so what else I like to do in Photoshop is to sharpen my photos. So I've already made an action for sharpening. Actions you can purchase online or you can create your own. I won't go into detail here because we could talk about that all day. But I went to, here I'll show you again. I went to File, Automate, Batch, and then you just select the action that you would like to use to play, and then you can, I'm going to choose my folder that I just did, and then override the Save As command because I set up an action specifically that already had Save As in it. Again, I'm not going to really go into creating actions and stuff, but this is the Kubota Magic Sharp action that it's playing right now, by the way. I happen to like that one. And when you do File Automate, it'll batch an entire folder at a time and it will apply whatever action you chose it to do. So this is an amazing time saver if there's an action that you have a go-to on every photo. And we're done. So here are the before and afters. You'll see the before on the left-hand side and the after on the right. And you can see that there's not a big difference in most photos. It's just simple changes that enhance the photo and give it a finalized look. So that's why it's really important to try to get your settings right in camera so that editing is just a simple way to enhance the photos. And now I can pull these files from the print folder to print in any size.
If you have any questions or comments, go ahead and give us them in the box below, and we will see you next time.
Thanks for watching.
Bye.
Bye.